Okay, so let us start off by talking about the idea of a React hook. And the first thing we need to understand when it comes to a React hook is that it is simply a function. Okay, and it's a function. There are functions that allow us to interface with the core systems of React. And you will notice that a big part of building your applications involves the idea of state. Of course, I have not yet really talked about the idea of state. But let's talk about the React hook first. So let's start off with an analogy. So you've been programming in C++ and probably some other languages. And in your data structures course, in your programming 2 course, you were introduced to the new function, where whenever you wanted to allocate some dynamic memory, you would simply say new. And of course, if the memory was allocated, it would be returned to you via a pointer. Now, why did we have to use new? Well, we had to use new because we do not directly have access to the computer's memory, which is controlled by the operating system. And so we have to actually use the tools provided to us by C++ to make that request. All right? So that's the idea of a React hook. It's simply a means of allowing us to access the React system. Another analogy would be that of a bank. So if you want to get access to, maybe you want to withdraw $200, you wouldn't just walk into the bank and go into the vault and take out $200. You would actually have to ask the teller, and the teller would then on your behalf withdraw $200. Okay, again, that's the same idea. Things are done on your behalf. However, for these things to work, the bank has to provide you a means of accessing your money, the teller. The operating system has to provide you a means for accessing memory. That's a programming language. And in the case of React, those are the React hooks. Okay, I hope that made sense. So let's start talking about the use state React hook. And notice that React hooks start with the lowercase word use. Okay, so that's the first hint that you're using a hook. Again, a function. Now, let's motivate the need for the use state React hook, or the use state function. So whenever we have our UI, our component, okay, and it's loaded into our browser, then React will render that component. Okay, so when it displays it on the browser, we say that's the render. And React will only do this once. All right, and by the way, that's also called mounting the component. Okay, so again, it's very important. This initial rendering happens only once. Now, obviously, if the user is interacting with your app, with your user interface, and he clicks a button, then something should change. All right, so obviously we need a way to make those changes happen. Now, the component will only re-render when either the state changes or the arguments to the component changes. Okay, now in React and front-end terminology, we don't say the function arguments, or we don't say the component arguments or parameters. We say the props or properties. Okay, but in your mind, they are basically arguments to the function that are passed in to the function, to the component. So if the props change, or if the state changes, then and only then will the UI, the component, be re-rendered and you can actually see the change. Okay. Now again, let me jump back to the idea of state. Okay. So let's think of state as local variables. So I'm pretty sure you've written functions before where you create local variables inside those functions to help you compute some or accomplish some task. All right. Now, I wanted to stop right there because that's pretty much the only thing that it has in common with state. Okay. So I'm going to show you in a program why the idea of a variable doesn't really work in React to actually update the UI. All right. But before I do that, I want to give you a better or more appropriate definition of state. And we can think of state as any piece of data. Okay? Any piece of data that changes as a result of the user interacting with our UI. So for example, if a user interacts with our UI by clicking a button and some value on the UI changes, maybe you have a number that increments from 5 to 6, or the user scrolls across or scrolls down the page, and as he or she is scrolling down the page is turning more blue. Right? So the user is expecting that when they scroll, they should see the page interacting or responding to what they're doing. Okay? And that response is a result of the UI being re-rendered. Right? So that is what we mean by state. State is any data that changes, and because that data changes, we need to then reflect that change on the UI. Right? So obviously that should make sense. Just like when you move your mouse across the screen on your computer, obviously if you move the mouse from left to right, you expect to see the mouse cursor on the right. So your operating system, Windows or Linux or Mac, re-renders so that it shows you the mouse cursor where you expect it. And that's the same thing we want to do when it comes to React. Whenever something changes, we will store or we will record that important information in a piece of data, which we'll call state. And then we will always tell the React system to re-render so that we actually see that change in real life. All right. That seems to be enough talking for now. Let's look at some code, and I want to show you how just by changing a variable doesn't really change the state. It doesn't re-render our UI. Okay, so this is a code that we will look at. Very simple. And what this code is supposed to do, we have a component called counter. We initialize a variable to 0. We have a function that will be executed every time we click this button. All right. And what it should do is to increment count. All right. Good. Notice I said should. All right. Let's see if it works. And I guess I should give you a heads up, it won't work. Okay, so let me open my Visual Studio Code. And this is the code for the counter. Okay. And what I have, let me get rid of this for now. Okay. We'll add this back later. Okay. Right. So of course by now you should know how to set up a React app. Right. So let's run this and let's see what it looks like. Okay. So again, it says welcome to the counter app. And count is initially set to 0. And of course, we have this increment count button. So we expect that when you click on the button, the function will be triggered, right? This function here will be triggered, which increments count. And then so when we display count here, it should be incrementing. Let's give it a shot. So let's start. Okay, I'm clicking, but nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. So obviously it seems that this local variable is not informing React that it should update my UI, specifically that it should update this 0 to 1 and to 2. So let's investigate some more. Let's open the developer tools. Okay. Let's try again. So if I do this, right, in the console, it shows me that count is incrementing. Okay. However, React does not know about it. All right. Now, I want to come back here and I want to show you, I want to prove to you that the UI is only rendered once. Okay. So if I come back here, okay, and I add this render the counter component, and I come back here and I add render the app component, then when we initially render, I should see this, and then I should see this. Good. So let's save that. Let's come back here. Let me open up my dev tools. Okay. Refresh the page. All right, so notice it tells me render the app component. So the app component is rendering, and because the counter is inside the app component, it also gets rendered, and so this message gets displayed. Now, if I click on this button, and if React actually did re-render, I expect that I would see this message again, because every time it's rendered, this message should display. But notice it's not, right? And so this is proof that React will only render your UI once. And if you want the UI to be re-rendered, then you cannot do it using regular variables like this. All right. So when you really want to tell React to re-render your component, you have to actually then use, which is the whole point of this lesson, we have to use the useState React hook. I'll leave it here. In the next video, we will update this code to use the useState React hook. I'll see you in that video.